A look inside one of the most fascinating bands of all time. There were a lot of artists pushing a lot of boundaries in the late 1970s and through the 80s. Then there was Talking Heads, a band so innovative, so boundary-pushing, so genre-defying that we still haven't seen another band quite like them. Listen to the Talking Heads J-Files with Richard Kingsmill above. Across 8 excellent albums, these New Yorkers embraced traditional and futuristic sounds. They played with rhythm and technology. They wrote memorable pop classics and mind-bending sonic explorations. They might have been weird, but they were somehow able to sell that weirdness to a wide audience. They opened up the minds of those who were willing to listen and sneakily crawled into those of the people who weren't. Here is just a very small part of the story of one of modern music's most fascinating and enduring bands. People like us. Let's begin by acknowledging that both neither the music nor the artistic and cultural impact of Talking Heads can easily be expressed with words. Yes, that sounds like an almighty cop-out at the beginning of an article that aims to examine at least a small part of their legacy. But even the band's mercurial frontman David Byrne acknowledges that his art is something best experienced and felt rather than talked about. He told Classic FM's Margaret Throsby in 2002, "I think people understand my work for the most part intuitively. But when they try and put that into words or explain what it is, then they get tongue-tied." This is coming from a man who penned a 352-page tome called How Music Works, a hefty omnibus collecting his thoughts on everything from composition to the economics of music. He's not afraid to talk about music on any level, but he acknowledges that his own can be tough to dissect. Of course, plenty of artists believe this to be true of their work. So what makes Talking Heads' case any stronger? Perhaps it's the diversity of their material. They have hits, perfect pop hits, Burning Down the House, Psycho Killer, and She Was, Road to Nowhere. Taken on these songs alone, Talking Heads are practically a classic rock band. He said we worked within a pop song format, so occasionally, almost by accident, something we did might fit into the mainstream and might be accepted as being acceptable and enjoyable by a mainstream audience or radio or whatever. Other things we did obviously were not going to fit in. But it was almost not by design, it was almost by accident. Our sensibility encompassed some things that were mainstream, and some things that were definitely not. We were caught up in the punk movement, which we kept denying at the time, saying we're not. But all the publicity we were getting along with all the other groups didn't do us any harm. There is of course more to Talking Heads than that handful of crossover tracks, so much more. There is the deep groove of life during wartime, the uneasy glissandos of This Must Be the Place, and the decidedly unsoulful retelling of Al Green's Take Me to the River, all of which have a differing degree of familiarity and popularity among certain audiences. Then there is the gargantuan 1980 record Remain in Light, a piece of work so ambitious from a band so fractured that it was either going to make or break them. It strengthened them, but very nearly went the other way. The band brought on 6 extra musicians to flesh out their ideas, including guitarist Adrian Belew, and convinced producer Brian Eno to write, perform, and produce the album. They even got rapidly rising star Robert Palmer to play percussion. Part 3, its deeply rhythmic Afro-funk dance party meets crazed street evangelist vibe, simply should not have worked. Certainly not, given it was cooked up and performed by a bunch of white American arty types, with a producer famous for ambient music and a guitarist whose squealing, impressionistic prog rock solos sounded completely alien. Byrne told Molly Meldrum on Countdown in 1981, "I like to throw myself into a difficult position and then work my way out of it. I got a lot of ideas from listening to evangelists on the radio here. They really use language in a very different way than the way that I was brought up to use it. That was inspiring to me, to hear language used in a different way. Musically, it remains a revelation, at once a perfect snapshot of a rapidly changing time in music, and an enduring example of their pop genius. But it was a hard sell," David Byrne told Rolling Stone in 1989. "It sounded too black for white radio and too white for black radio. Remain in Light was the worst-selling Talking Heads record ever." Despite its initial commercial struggle, Byrne has always considered it to be a significant record in the band's development. Remain in Light was critically well received, but I think it was also kind of a creative breakthrough for the band and I. That Rolling Stone article, which celebrates the record as the fourth best of the 1980s, is an essential read, not just to understand Remain in Light, but the complexity of Talking Heads as a musical entity as a whole. There was fighting, intellectualization, misremembered emotions, and passion for an artistic goal that no one could clearly identify. Tina Weymouth said, "We don't always know what we're doing, we often just get excited, put something down and say, oh neat." Perhaps we can't accurately convey the significance of Talking Heads because sometimes it just gets so damn weird that we can't even begin to imagine where these ideas came from and how the band plucked up the courage to execute them. That weirdness is regularly credited to the art school credentials of the band's members. Each of the members of the band found themselves in art school at one time or another. Though Byrne dismissed its influence at the time, Byrne told Meldrum, "I think art students are the kind of people who couldn't hack it in regular college. Art school is just the easiest alternative." But on our ends, Into the Music in 2002, Byrne was more generous about the impact of their education. Byrne's lyrics are the most immediate signifier of the band's oddness. While he has conceded that they have meaning, he finds it tough to talk about. If he could clearly articulate what his work means, Byrne wouldn't have a need to make it. This profound, indefinable strangeness extended well beyond the band's music. The band's live show was widely praised, though much was made of their rigid and emotionally distant stage presence. But that part wasn't by design. They were nervous. Byrne, who directed a number of these videos, brought his visual nous to the stage for the filming of the band's celebrated 1984 concert film Stop Making Sense. He performs dressed in a suit that gets progressively bigger as the show progresses. By the time the band are almost finished their set, the suit is absurdly large. During one of the moments in the film when Byrne interviews himself, he justifies his clothing decision as so.